Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Inside Politics here on Time Television. I'm your host, Ali Najmi, and we have a very special guest today. We have Congressman Joe Crowley right here from Queens, the Vice Chairman of the Democratic Caucus in the United States Congress. Congressman Crowley, welcome aboard.
Thank you, Ali. Good to be with you.
You're somebody that's very known to our community and to our viewership because of your leadership and your work with the community, and we want to thank you for that. What's the update from Washington? What's the latest that's going on? What are you fighting the hardest for?
Well, at the moment we're in break from Washington in district work period. So over the last few days, well, actually a week and a half or so, I've been in the district attending events, meeting with constituents. I spoke yesterday at Aviation High School before a wonderful group of students, and a number of Bangladeshi students there in particular. They have an uptick in Bangladeshi represented within the student body, and it's wonderful to see the diversity that exists there, and to know that a New York City public high school like Aviation exists that's producing really wonderful, great people. Warms me to know that that's happening. We hear so much negative about what's happening with the New York City school system,
right?
And at the same time, we have a great school like Aviation High School. When these kids graduate, they graduate with an associate's degree, which is a great leg up.
Right, totally.
Means only need 2 more years of college to have a bachelor's degree. So it's a great program, and they find work immediately, which is great as well. In Washington, it's still pretty stagnant. There's not a great deal that's getting accomplished, and I think reflective of the commitment by the Republicans not to give President Obama any victories before, legislative victories before he leaves office. It may very well be that the last major legislative victory he will have been the tax extender bill as well as the spending bill that we did in December. There's not a great anticipation by members of my caucus, the Democratic caucus, that we'll find much cooperation with Republicans on major issues.
It's got to be very frustrating since the Republicans do control the House. What do you think is the future of issues like immigration reform, which obviously is a big issue for this county and the city and everybody here?
I'm a strong proponent, very supportive of comprehensive immigration reform. I was hopeful that in the last Congress, that with the passage of a comprehensive bill and a bipartisan passage of a bill in the Senate, driven by Democrats, that we would have had seen by now full comprehensive legislation passed. That did not come to fruition because the House Republicans continued to derail any attempt to bring a bill like that before the floor of the House. In fact, we haven't had any really substantial immigration reform bill before the House for many years.
Right. Now, I know you've been a strong proponent and advocate for the immigrant community, and I know you've taken a very strong position just recently on a group of Bangladeshis that are seeking asylum and might be getting deported. And in fact, there have been instances where some have.
Right.
And I know you spoke out at great length about it and sent a letter to Department of Homeland Security and
Secretary Kerry as well.
And Secretary Kerry. Can you tell me about any updates on that issue and what do you think is going to happen?
At this point, I'm asking for a moratorium on deportations until we can have a fuller understanding as to who these individuals really are. It's really hard to assess 100 people from a community in a situation where they're being deported in an imminent way, very soon. So we can actually hear what the stories are and understand. I believe that they've had a process that they've gone through in terms of application for that, but to really have an understanding as to what threat does exist, if one does at all, I think we need to have a little bit of a moratorium so that we can have a full faith and confidence in the system.
Right.
Not only as it pertains to these individuals, but to the broader community, from the Bangladesh community and beyond as well.
It's a moratorium on deportations of Bangladeshis?
Of this group of 100 right now. I think it's a very large group. It's hard for us to get our hands around 100 individuals. I don't know who they are. I can't just assume that all of them are free of political intimidation or bodily intimidation by returning home, or who is and who isn't.
And what's been the response from State and Homeland?
It's a recent letter, so we're hoping, given the nature of how deportations take place, that they'll take it up quickly. I hope to be in contact with. I know I'll be in contact with Homeland Security this week on the phone. I was on the phone earlier this week on another matter with the director of ICE, and I also let her know that I'm interested in this issue of Bangladeshi deportees.
Now, I know a lot of issues related concerning Bangladesh are of great interest to you. In fact, I know you're the founder of the Bangladesh Caucus in the U.S. Congress. How did that caucus come about? How is it doing, and what's on the agenda?
Before I answer that, and I'll be happy to do that, you asked me the question in terms of what's the prospects of comprehensive reform.
Yes.
The one thing I will say, it really depends on who the president is going to be.
Right.
It will not happen under President Obama, unfortunately, because we don't have enough time at this point. And given the election coming up, I don't really see an opportunity to do that while this Republican Congress is in place in the House and the Senate. I can say that if Donald Trump is elected, which I highly doubt, but I'm a little bit concerned about that.
Sure.
Or, quite frankly, if Ted Cruz is elected, we're not going to see much action on that. I think if Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders, for instance, are elected, I think I personally think that Hillary Clinton will be in a better position, given her experience of working in a bipartisan way in the Senate, to actually get a comprehensive bill done. But either one will have a much better chance of moving on the issue.
Well, while we're talking about the presidential race, let's just continue. You've endorsed Hillary Clinton. Well, tell us about your endorsement and why you're supporting Hillary.
Enthusiastically. Look, I have a great respect for both Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton. I serve with Bernie in the House of Representatives. And he chose to join our caucus. He was elected as an independent from a state that had sent Republicans to the House at points in time. And we welcome him into our caucus. I also had the opportunity to serve with Senator Clinton when Secretary Clinton, when she was Senator Clinton. I've known her since her days as First Lady. I have tremendous respect for her, and I believe she's a woman of her word. I think she's one of the most decent, honorable people I've ever met, and sincere people I've ever met as well in politics. And that's why I enthusiastically support her. I also think she's very, very familiar with Bangladesh. She visited there as First Lady, and she was there as Secretary of State. I think she understands the issues of Bangladesh, and certainly understands the issues of Bangladeshis here in Queens County in particular. So she's very familiar.
And we got the primary coming up here in New York on April 19th.
Correct.
How's it looking?
2 weeks. I think it looks good. The nuance here, this is not going to be an open primary. New York is a closed primary state. Means that registered Democrats will be voting for it, not Working Families Party, not independents. It's also not a caucus. Where Bernie, I think, has had the advantage of students, of younger people, which is great. And I think it's enthusiastic for our party to recognize that Bernie has engaged a new generation of voters. They're enthusiastic about him because of his message. I believe that it's not necessarily a realistic message in terms of what is really achievable. Free tuition for college, free health care, and nothing's free. Someone pays at the end. And we have, I think when it comes to a single payer plan, I'm in favor of that. That utopia. How we get there is the other question. It's not going to happen overnight. But I think he's bringing a whole new generation of voters. And at some point, we all have to come together, coalesce behind a candidate. I think that will be Hillary Clinton. And I welcome the opportunity to bring those folks in and have that enthusiasm transferred to Hillary and help her win the election in November.
Well, you got to dream big when you're campaigning, right?
You do. I think that to some degree, there's an expectation that you can fulfill the promises you make.
I see.
And I think that's important in terms of people's faith in politics. And Donald Trump says he's going to build a wall and he's not going to pay for it. No one believes he's going to build a wall, and no one believes if he did that we wouldn't pay for it.
Of course.
It's not being honest with the American people, but it's speaking to people who are frustrated. And I think to some degree Bernie speaks to folks like that for different reasons within the Democratic Party. People who feel that they've been left out. And so I could see that appeal. I think the person who has the toughest time in all these elections is Hillary Clinton right now. She's a known entity. She has a proven record, especially when it comes to foreign affairs and issues of international relations. He's
Now,
the top candidate.
We brought up Donald Trump a few times. He's also a son of Queens,
Right,
and
yeah.
he said some very, very alarming things, especially for our viewership and for everybody here. He has proposed a ban on Muslim immigrants coming to the United States. What do you think of his comments? And what do you
I think he's disqualified from being, should be disqualified from actually running
Right.
in the first place. I mean, he has the right to run, but I don't think he has any foreign affairs experience. The issue in terms of how he speaks of Muslim Americans is a serious issue. But I might suggest that maybe the more serious issue is his lack of understanding of the nuclear detente that exists, nuclear weapons, and the spread of weapons of mass destruction. That scares me a great deal. His lack of understanding about social issues like abortion, for instance, and other issues that I think he's using to talk to specific communities within the country. One other thing that really has me concerned is his outspokenness in terms of his angst against terrorism abroad. Without a similar response to the KKK, which is a white supremacist group that has terrorized people in our country, including Jews, African Americans, Catholics. I'm sure that they would now include Muslims in their eyesight as well, and it is not reflective of what our country has stood for.
Right. And what's your message to all your Muslim American constituents, the large number of Muslim Americans in Queens County especially? What's your message to them in this rising Islamophobia, people like Donald Trump on the national stage? I mean, what's your message to them in the political process?
One is that they're not alone in the historic nature of the discrimination they may be facing right now, whether it's the Irish or the Jewish population, Italians, Chinese, Germans, at one time, all have historically faced similar problems. There was a political party created in the 1800s known as the Know Nothing Party to keep German and Irish Catholics out of the United States.
Wow.
And eventually amalgamated into then Republican Party, which was a different Republican Party in many respects. That was the party of Lincoln, and Lincoln certainly did not, I'm sure, assign on to those issues.
Right.
In fact, Lincoln brought more freedom to the United States than any other president before or since.
Right. We're just going to have to take a short break, Congressman. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back right here on Time Television. Welcome back to Inside Politics here on Time Television. I'm Najmi, and of course, we're still here with our great guest, Congressman Joe Crowley. Congressman, just before the break, we were talking about Donald Trump and the presidential race. I want to shift gears and get back to some foreign policy. I know you're the founder of the Bangladesh caucus in the United States Congress. I would love to know just a little bit of history on that caucus, how it came to be, and what's on the agenda.
There were a number of folks when I became the congressman from the then 7th Congressional District, now the 14th Congressional District, a change in reapportionment, who came to visit me about concerns about the growing Bangladeshi, from the Bangladeshi community, concerns about the Bangladeshi community here having a voice. And I have to say that my interest in South Asia really stems from my favorite Beatle, who's George Harrison.
Okay.
Both from India and learning to play the sitar in Mumbai, and also as a very young, as a boy, almost not even a young man, the concert for Bangladesh left an incredible impression upon me.
Wow.
As I learned more of my own heritage and the use of hunger as a weapon, a tool, a weapon to subjugate the Irish people during the 1800s. I know during the civil war within Bangladesh, between East and West Pakistan at the time, that the deprivation of food, aside from weapons, real weapons, caused the loss of 1 million people in Bangladesh. And Bangladesh is a nascent country. It's still very new in many respects. It's it's a little over 40 years old. That it went through such trauma. It's still recovering from that trauma. We know that from the trials that have taken place recently in Bangladesh in terms of war crimes and human rights violations that occurred back in the early 70s that they're still coming to terms with today. And that was one of the things that attracted me, knowing the difficulties that Bangladesh had faced in terms of its creation as a moderate Muslim nation, wanting to take its rightful place amongst the nations of the world, and deservedly so. And Ben Gilman, who was the ranking member of the then Foreign Affairs Committee, or International Relations Committee, I think it was called at that time, had also invited me to work together with him to create, and also from New York, and a Republican,
Right.
helped me in terms of putting together the caucus and having a bipartisan spirit to it.
Wow.
And it continues to this day.
So what's the top priority for the caucus right now?
We've had a number of important, I would say right now, the GSP restoration for Bangladesh, in light of the steps they've taken to improve labor conditions in Bangladesh. I've expressed to the USTR trade representative that I believe it's time that we restore Bangladesh in terms of its GSP eligibility. Coming after the fires and the building collapse in Bangladesh,
Right.
there was some serious, really, really serious issues that needed to be addressed. I think there's more they have to do, and to continue on that path. I think encouraging them would be a sign that the GSP would be restored soon. Also working with the Justice Department, we were very successful in creating new silos or categories for hate crimes. At one time, hate crimes against Muslims, hate crimes against Sikhs, hate crimes against Arabs, hate crimes against Hindus were all putting together. And it didn't serve those communities properly, and in terms of criminal activity that was perpetrated against them, or
Right.
discrimination, and wasn't helping law enforcement.
Right.
So we were successful in convincing the Justice Department with former Attorney General Holder's efforts to bring about that change. And I think law enforcement is better off for it, and I think all the communities are better off for that as well.
Getting back to just some Bangladesh foreign affairs, there's been tremendous upheaval recently in Bangladesh in terms of contested elections and people not
Or
participating.
non-contested elections.
Or uncontested, right, not participating in them. Certain opposition parties have made some serious criticisms about the process. What do you think about the current state of governance in Bangladesh?
I'm neither a BNP nor an Awami League or Jamaat Islamist Democrat. I'm a U.S. Democrat. So I try to stay out of the politics of the parties. I don't want to be identified with being for one or the other. Because I think there are good people in both, and I think they have some issues with some as well. Or I should say, primarily the smaller party, the Jamaat Islami, I'm not as familiar with. I'm familiar with, but in terms of their leadership. And so I try to do it in a balanced way, critical when I think it's necessary, and also bring praise to both parties when I think it's as well. I think there is a bit of a stagnation that exists in Bangladesh, the politics. It's been through two administrations right now, the ping pong back and forth between the two important women that are identified with both parties. It's my hope that at some point we can get past this, get back to a working parliament, and the trust has to be built up at some point between both parties. I don't think it's healthy for Bangladesh to have the stagnation. I think too much is happening in the world, too much is happening that is in their bailiwick that they need to be more engaged in it as well. So I hope at some point we get beyond that.
Right.
It's not a criticism of either, it's a criticism of both.
Right.
So.
Right. I understand. I want to shift the focus back to local politics.
Yeah.
So in Queens County, you're the chairman of the Queens Democratic Organization, the local Democratic Party, and you're involved in endorsements and recruiting and building the party. How do you think the South Asian community widely, not just the Bangladeshi community, is doing in terms of being involved in the organization, and what do you think the future is like for that community politically?
If any, if history is teaching us anything at all, it takes time for the development. I would speak more broadly in terms of Asian representation. We've elected the first Asian in the history of the United States from the East Coast in Grace Meng,
Right.
of Taiwanese Chinese descent, who's married to a Korean
Right.
American.
What a Queen story.
It is a great Queen story, and I think We have had appointed members of the Democratic leadership, and Mohammed Aminullah
Yes.
for many years, and he's very capable. We have a Sikh American, Gurdeep Narula, who has been engaged in the politics as well.
Both district leaders.
Right. And we have it in the state committee as well as the county committee as well. We see the diversity.
And most recently on the bench in
That's correct.
Queens
Yeah.
Civil Court
Right,
with
right.
Ushur Pandit, who you made history
Correct.
nominating the first South Asian in Queens County to the judgeship.
Exactly. So I have made it a hallmark of mine. My predecessor, Tom Manton, started this, and I've expanded on it in terms of having Queens be as representative. I especially think in the judiciary, where people are going in looking for justice. They may not get someone who looks like them when they have a grievance, or if it's a criminal activity, but they know that there is someone in that system that does look like them, who comes from their background, understands where they're coming from as well. And I think that's critically important, to have faith and confidence in the system itself. In terms of elective office, I think it's going to come. You've been involved yourself in a number of attempts to break through and break the glass ceiling, so to speak. But it wasn't always easy for African Americans. It wasn't always easy for the Latino community. It wasn't always easy for
The Irish.
The Irish, sure, and Italians, and going back, depending on or the Jewish community going back. But eventually it does happen, and I'm pretty confident. I'm very confident that a South Asian at some point will break through, whether it's in the city council, the state assembly, or the state senate, and possibly even Congress someday.
Right. Absolutely.
And it'll happen in Queens, I think, first.
I think so too. How do you think, for everybody who's watching and who's excited about politics, I know there's actually, just this week I've heard about South Asians for Hillary rally, South Asians for Bernie rally, Bangladeshis for Bernie rally, Bangladeshis for Hillary, all the sub-communities.
I've only heard about the Bangladeshis for Hillary rally. So,
okay, I'll send you the invite to the other one. There's a lot of interest. Okay, after the presidential election is over, how do you think we, as Democrats, can keep all these people engaged, especially at the local level? And why should everybody watching, after 2016 is over, in 2017 or 18, how can they still be involved with the local Democratic Party?
I believe very strongly that elections are a part of our civic duty as American citizens, to register to vote, as much as it is when called upon to serve in a jury to do that, or to participate in civic life. I think it's important to do that as well, to contribute to your community. Things won't change unless you're engaged. And if you have a grievance or you have an issue, it's important for people to remain engaged. And not everyone will. I don't hold my breath expecting that everyone's going to continue to be. What these elections do is they really they show what's best about America.
Right.
The freedoms that exist in this country, as you've heard said before, don't come free. People have had to sacrifice. I'm not even so sure that everyone knew when they were sacrificing what they were always sacrificing for.
Right.
They just love their country. And what our country does stand for is for freedom, is for the possibility, the hope, as President Obama talks so greatly about, that you can make it in this country, regardless of where you come from.
Right.
And that's been true for so many years before. I think it's true for the Bangladeshi community. I think it's true for the broader Muslim community in the United States as well. Given that opportunity to shine, the Muslim community has served in the U.S. Army for decades and maybe centuries at this point, and they've bled for this country as well. They've died for this country, and that needs to be recognized and lauded and praised as much as anyone else who has done that in service of this great land. It's not just Jews. It's not just Christians. It's not just the more established religions here in the United States. There are Hindus. There are Jains. There are Muslims. There are others who are sacrificing as well because they love this country.
Right. Well, that's a great message, and we want to thank you so much for joining us. We're out of time, but I know this conversation will continue in many other ways. I want to thank everybody for joining us here today on Time Television, and we want to thank our special guest, Congressman Joe Crowley. Good night.